This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
You don't need to have 6 hectares of land to rewild. Rewilding can go as small as you like, and the urban garden is a perfect example. Today I'm visiting with an entomologist in her garden to discover how her intentionally wild and weedy garden is benefiting the growing invertebrate population living there. If you're looking for a worthwhile reason to do less work in your garden, listen in to find out more. Today's episode of Rewilding in Action is supported by Bin in Dunedin at 126 Crawford Street. Locally owned and operated, Bin in Dunedin specialises in quality whole foods, speciality grocery items and low-waste shopping options. For more information, go to binin.co.nz. Kia ora, welcome to Rewilding in Action with me, your host, Maureen Howard. Today, I've cycled to Corstafing, to a suburb of Dunedin, to visit my guest, Dr. Jenny Yant, who's a senior lecturer specialising in insect behavioural ecology at Otago University. Jenny lives on a typical suburban section of just over 700 square metres. Her back garden borders with some large blue gums and poplars that bring in the birds and give her natural garden setting a forest feel. Jenny grows fruit, vegetables and flowers in ways that give space for other wildlife, as well as providing a foraging paradise for her 5 hens. But Jenny's mind is always on the well-being of the invertebrate population living in her garden. And I asked Jenny what considering the invertebrates involves.
If I want to think about providing a good floral resource for my bees, I have to also think about what's happening underground to make sure that the soil is proper. And so, anytime I dig up or plant something new, if I find a worm crawling around, that's a good day. That means that I'm doing something right in my yard. If I'm playing around in the rocks or, weeding and I come across a giant spider, that's a huge sign. That's a sign that I'm doing something really good. So I welcome all of these, detritivores and worms are really good for aerating the soil. The spiders are really good at, kind of pest control in the garden too. And so all of those factors kind of feed into each other, no pun intended, to create this floral landscape, which admittedly I plant mostly to feed bees, but I also try to make sure it's pretty, and I just like looking at it too.
Yeah, you're establishing an ecosystem that'll sort of look after itself.
Oh yeah, I grew up on a farm, on a vegetable farm, and I know the effort that goes in to properly caring for plants to produce crops. I don't want that with my life. Otherwise, I would have taken over the farm. So here, if I plant it and it lives, hooray! If it dies, well, that's just an opportunity to go back to the garden center and find another plant to put in its spot. So real low maintenance, drives some people crazy because the grass is long and everything is kind of like weeding into something else. But I see my chickens having a great time eating all over my yard. One of the coolest things about not mowing my lawn, which bothers me too, don't worry, because when I do mow it, it looks nice. But if I kind of walk through the long grasses, the pea waka waka, his name is Meeps, because he goes, Meeps, Meeps, Meeps. He comes by and he just loves it because I'm kicking up all of the little bugs in the grasses and he just starts swooping around me. So there's times I might be sitting in the backyard. Meeps will come up and just hang out by the chair with me and go, Meeps, Meeps. And 9 times out of 10, I'll get up and I'll kick around some grasses for him a little bit. And it's just really cool. I feel like Snow White, with all of these animals that just come by and hang out with me.
Yeah. And actually, some of the students at DNI and I, we did a little study with their teacher, and we asked Delta to just let the grass grow a little bit and not weed eat it as low down as some of the other bits. And we compared different sites, and there was many more insects flying around and other invertebrates just from a few extra months of not mowing.
Yes, 100%. When the DCC came through, for a while there, I was wondering why they weren't mowing the berm outside of my house. I love that they weren't mowing the berm outside of my house, but I didn't know what happened. And then I saw a thing on social media saying, weigh in because the DCC is thinking about, mowing pretty regularly again. And I went straight onto the website and I emailed them and I said, please don't mow outside of my house. I'm so thankful that you guys wait so long. These little flowers, these little weeds come up. They're feed for the bees. I've got so many birds that hang out in my backyard and all of the little bugs that are hanging out inside of those berms. And mowing takes, petrol, it takes energy, it takes manpower. If we just don't do that, everything is just so much better. And DCC responded to me right away and thanked me very much for my can. And since then, they haven't been increasing their mowing, and I've got nice long grass in the berm, which I really appreciate. They also gave me permission to plant hebe in the front yard, which I haven't done yet. I've got the hebe
on the berm. You mean
on the berm? Yeah, around my pathway, and so I thought that was really, really kind of them to, because I know how they want to be able to manage this stuff. But I was like, I really want to increase native plants, flowering plants, in as many spaces as I can. Can I do this? And they were open to that. So I really appreciated that too.
And I think, yes, it's choosing species that are going to be fairly low on berms, not grow into huge trees.
Exactly, yeah. So it had to be something that, not something that I had to manage because I'm not going to do that, and something that wasn't going to be too big, something that wasn't going to get too unwieldy, but still something that had a nice shape and was good for the fauna that I'm trying to support.
So one of the reasons I'm really excited to come and visit with you is just this idea of rewilding in our gardens. And a lot of the episodes that I've been doing have been on much bigger properties. And we tend to think, well, there's not a lot that I can do if I don't have a big property like that. But actually, we can rewild on a smaller level, can't we?
Yeah. So my front yard used to be just grass, but I now have an entire rose garden. I've got 4 raised vegetable beds, 2 by 1 meters. I've got an entire orchard of pears and cherries mixed with a bunch of flowering kofi, as well as hebe shrubs. I just need space to be able to get around, to be able to access these things once in a while. But other than that, I didn't need grass. What am I going to use flat grass for?
You don't have a cow, do you?
I don't have a cow. And let me tell you, I've got 5 chickens, and they are not pulling their weight when it comes to mowing this lawn. They're working hard. They're trying, but...
We've got 5 of them around us right at this very moment, and they're making some nice little holes, I must say, in your grass.
I hate grass, so they are doing their work. They're digging around, they're fighting all the good little bugs, and every once in a while they'll chew up some grass. So good job, girls. And then they get into my little fairy garden, and then they get yelled at.
And your fairy garden, you've got some various little gnomes and things like that.
Okay, this is important to hear. So when I first moved in, I was organizing a gift for a friend of mine, and I bought her this pink flamingo lawn ornament. But it didn't fit in the box with everything else. So I was like, well, I guess I keep that. I bought something else for her. So then I just stuck the flamingo in the backyard, and I emailed her and I said, this is your flamingo, but it lives in my yard. You can name it. Its name is Miss Mingo. And then I built a gnome village around the flamingo. So now there's just this random little flower garden popped up in the middle of my lawn, because why not? And then Gnome Village started to get really overpopulated. So I created this suburb, town of Nome, which is just by the pond over there. And then I broke my ankle and couldn't do anything in the yard, so I created what's called Fairy Island. So in Fairy Island, there's a pot. That's the wizard's house. That's the wizard's farm. He grows herbs for his elixirs. And then there's a little fairy garden, and I've got little fairies in there, a little light-up house. And then, there's just little random critters and characters all over the yard.
So there's more than just invertebrates in this garden. But we'll go back to the invertebrates, because that is our focus.
Yes.
Now, and another thing that I love about rewilding in the garden is less work. I know you've cut back on mowing the lawn. What other kinds of things have you cut back on?
I very rarely water anything in my yard. And that's the only time I water is if we've gone through a huge dry spell and my vegetables are low, or my roses might be failing. But otherwise, nothing gets watered, nothing gets extra attention.
And you're able to do that because you've got a lot more ground cover, haven't you?
Right. So the ground cover really helps keep that moisture in. And one of the things that I did, so last weekend as I was, quote unquote, tidying up, which I have to actually point it out to people because it doesn't look tidy at all. I take any offcuts or trimmings of native plants, I use as ground cover mulch that I haven't really mulched up, mostly because 2 reasons. First, they're native. Second, there's lots of bugs in those plants that I don't want heading off to the green bin because they belong here. So let's let them get back in. If I'm digging up other things, like right now I'm weeding out some miner's lettuce in the front yard, that's all going to go down to my chicken coop for them to eat. Rose trimmings, those go in the green waste bin. So, but I've got lots of piles of little compost areas, which the chickens just love. And so that's been working out really, really well. Even the little fairy gardens that I've got too, nothing gets watered. Everything is just kind of set up and it either thrives or it dies. And that's the rule.
What else do you not do in your wonderful wild garden? Intentionally wild, I should say.
Yes. So 2 things. I try not to use fertilizer, except I use fertilizer on my roses because they're planted to remind me of my grandma. And sometimes I'll use them on my crops. Nowhere else. It's not necessary. I've got enough bugs and enough chicken poop running around this yard. The other thing I absolutely don't do is spray for pesticides. Mostly because, I'm recognizing all of those important critters living underground, the worms, the little hoppers. Also, a lot of bumblebees, a lot of our native bees nest underground as well. And while some may be okay with some pesticide in the ground, it can't be that good for them to be soaking in pesticide. So it's just not an option. Now, I know what you're also thinking. But Jenny, if you have roses, what about the aphids? Let me tell you. If you have ever popped bubble wrap and felt bad because you're wasting plastic, if you try popping aphids on your roses, it is just as satisfying. Pop, 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 pop. It's like organic bubble wrap. It's amazing.
I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah. Problem is, though, you end up getting stained with green on your fingers, and then I wipe it on my house, and then my house gets stained green, and it's fine. I am trying to get the silver eyes to start eating the aphids more often, which they're supposed to do, but apparently if you feed them too well with sugar water, they get spoiled and they don't do their job. I see a lot of my silver eyes, especially I've got a bunch of ko-fi and other trees in the garden outside of my office window, and I saw them the other day. They were just running all around the ko-fi shrub, not necessarily just going to the flowers, but picking off little bugs throughout the whole shrub. So the silver eyes are definitely taking advantage of all of the little bugs that are living in my shrubs too.
And have you intentionally created any habitat in the garden for invertebrates here?
Okay, I know you said you didn't want me to talk about my fairy garden anymore, but yes. So my friend gifted me a bunch of decorations, and one of them is this truck, and it's got this little wagon. And so I break a bunch of sticks apart, and I include a bunch of sticks. Now, there's a lot of our native bees that use sticks or stems or twigs or hollow stems to build their nests. So I often, within these villages, I like to pile little piles of sticks. I make it kind of look like a little wood pile or something that they're carrying around, but in actuality, it's specifically for them. Let me rephrase that. I've tried to leave bare patches for the ground nesting bees. It's really hard, especially when one of my best friends refers to any open patch that's unplanted as a gap in my yard, and then I feel bad and I've got to fill it with something. So I'm not as good at leaving patches of bare soil. I don't really have a lot of space for that either.
No, but it is something that I often see. People will have banks.
Yeah.
And they cover it in plastic.
Oh, God.
Sometimes. But really that bank, if it was left bare, yes, it will attract some weeds, but there'll be lots of bare space. And you'll often see, if you walk by, all of these little holes.
Right? Oh, and so that's one of the areas of research that we're starting to get into, is this nesting ecology of some of our ground nesting bees. So I do have a clay bank, and I try to pull the grasses off of it to leave it as bare as I can. So that I do manage to do that. I have seen sweat bees in my yard, which is great. They don't forage very far. So if you see native bees in your yard, it's a good sign that you're doing something right, because they're able to nest nearby. I do see a lot of the stem nesting masked bees, the Hylaeus bees. I get a lot of those every summer. And I think one of the reasons is because anytime I tear something down, I just leave it there. So there's so many sticks. There's so much potential for these animals to build a nest in, that it provides this extra opportunities for them. that's really special.
Yeah, it's having that complexity, isn't it? And there's one thing, before we came on air, you talked about having all the different layers in the garden.
Yeah, so before I owned my own property, I would always have little flower gardens because I wanted to feed the bees. But after I moved into my place here, really started thinking more about the 3 dimensions of a garden and how you don't need to have a big space to have a garden. So in my veggie gardens, for example, I always plant peas or snap peas or something, but they can grow vertically. And they don't need 2-dimensional space. And so that's really helpful. In the yard, though, I've tried to plant a lot of shrubs where I can. I just randomly pop trees in every once in a while. And watching the opportunities for birds to just perch and hang out, but also knowing within some of my pittosporum in the front yard that they're just going to be full of spiders that need and rely on that complex 3-dimensional space to build their webs, thinking about other organisms like even lizards or anything else that might need those bigger spaces to hide and to nestle into.
It's seeing that the garden doesn't just belong to us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fairy gardens are for me. But almost everything else that goes in this yard, I'm constantly thinking about who can eat this, who is going to rely on this. For trees, you have to think about the long game. I'm thinking about carbon sequestration a little bit too. I've got a number of mako trees. They're a host plant for the puriri moth, but the puriri moth only lives in the North Island. But I'm myself prepared down here because with global climate change, eventually those moths are going to need to travel south. And oh boy, will this property be ready for them in 20, 30 years with mako trees at least 6 inches in diameter for them. So thinking about all of those things, one of the most fun things that I do, this is why I never get anything done in my garden, is because I'm constantly carrying my phone, which has a camera on it, and just seeing the cool, unique insects that pop out. I've got these lemon tree borer parasitoid wasps. They are just beautiful, but they are so easy to ignore. And I have this photo of one on a blade of grass, and I blew it up. It's sitting. It's on a piece of canvas in my house now. But just the magnificence, the variety, the uniqueness of so many of our insects that just go unnoticed until you just stop and just look and kind of peek behind the curtains or the shrubs in this case. And the diversity that you can find is just amazing. It's just breathtaking.
It is incredible, I think, and it's an interest that you can take anywhere with you if you love invertebrates because they're everywhere.
It's the best part, right? Although a friend of mine asked me to go hiking with her this morning, and I thought, what's going to be flying around this time of year? There's nothing for me to take a photo of. Yeah. Call me back in 2 months when things are active again. But otherwise, yeah, normally people hate hiking with me because it takes me 3 hours to take a 10-minute walk.
You should hang out with the botanists there likewise.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. If I go hiking with insect people or birders too, we do fine because everybody has to stop every 2 seconds. So we did a science Wananga last year, and I worked with the person that I was working with as a spider guy. And everybody was like, okay, where do you need to go? What do you need to do? I'm like, are there like plants near the marae? And they're like, yeah, there's trees, there's a grove. I'm like, yeah, we're fine. And we literally took the kids maybe 10 meters away from the marae, and we just started flipping rocks. And we're like, this is why what we want to show you. We don't have to go somewhere place special. You can go in your backyard, and all of a sudden the world just turns into this bigger place.
That's right. It's nature is actually all around us, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so there's been a lot of efforts at the university to try to do these bio blitzes at different gardens because they're putting efforts into creating gardens, creating green space. But then they want to see, well, does this matter? We have a PhD student at the university who's been monitoring the invertebrates along George Street for all of the native plantings. And so she got in on, basically day one and has been able to observe, knowing that where could they come from? Where did they start with? And a lot of people think, oh, well, I need bees, so I'm going to put some bees on my property. Or I need this, so I'm going to put this on my property. And the reality is those things are out here. They're just looking for a place to go. So that's why I don't have my own honeybee colony. That's why I don't put a bumblebee colony purposely out here, because if I get a natural bumblebee colony housing out here, I can't support all those bumblebees. I can support the ones that are already looking for a place to nest.
Where there's a functional room for them, and there's food and there's the habitat and everything.
Exactly. So my role is just to create the space. And the best day was when I started getting the native bees popping into my yard and realizing that that's the sign that I've created a safe space for them to nest and a nutritious space for them to feed from.
So how many years have you been here?
I've been on this property for about 6.5 years now.
And when did you start to notice the native bees?
Probably, it was after I got the chickens because I was in their coop. So that would have been around 2020. Right. So yeah, just maybe a couple of years after I had moved in. Now, in their defense, I've also been getting better at recognizing them too. So they're really small. They often go unnoticed or misidentified.
But when you first came here, it was just a grassy lawn, wasn't it? So you've really things have changed hugely.
Yeah. So the people that I purchased the house from had done a lot of planting of like native flax and hebe and other different native plantings throughout here. So they were already starting out. But yeah, it was a lot of mowed space, a lot of manicured areas, if you will. And I just said, nope. And I just let it all go. And yeah, within a couple of years after moving in, I started noticing native bees, and the relationship with the fantail the pea waka waka has just been the best.
That's so wonderful. And one of the things I noticed was the sign on your gate saying, what does it say?
I think this one says, "Pardon the weeds, I'm feeding the bees."
Yes. And because one of the things about having a wilder garden, I've got one too, is that the neighbours might be looking across into it and thinking, what's going on there?
Right? So luckily the shrubs, when I moved in, the shrubs were already really tall in the front yard, so people can't really see in or say anything, which is great. But also, like, my next door neighbor, he seems to put as much effort into mowing his lawn as I do, so he doesn't care. My other neighbors, they're so kind, and everybody is so nice. But yeah, like I said, I grew up on a farm, and my dad loved to mow the lawn. And so I grew up mowing a lot of lawn, acres and acres of lawn every week in the summer. And, I hated it. So I don't want anything to do with it. I do have a weed eater. But I'll tell you what, when my dad came to visit me back in 2019, he looked around and he said, "This isn't how I would do it, but this is your house, and I will respect that." And that was a huge relief because I thought he was going to take the weed eater and just go to town out here. And he didn't. So it's been really nice, especially the people that I know well that don't want their places to look like this too, know me well enough to know that this is intentional and not just because I'm lazy. I'm also a little lazy, but it's intentional.
Yes, I think we stick with the intentional.
Yeah.
And so getting around it, having little signs saying that what you're doing, as people are approaching, they've got it on the sign on the gate, and knowing that you're an entomologist, an insect lover, they need to know what to expect.
Exactly. It's neat. I think there's a lot more appreciation for it than there is disdain.
Yeah. I think we're in a cultural shift.
I hope so.
There are other cultural shifts, which is the yard garden, which is just paving it over.
Let me tell you what I feel about that, because this is important. In every crack in my front yard, because I've got a little walkway that's paved, in every crack a plant comes up. And I just look at that as like, life finds a way, right? How can I remove that? Now, when it gets kind of big and starts messing up the pavement and makes walking difficult, then I'll remove some of it. Or if it gets too overgrown. But I've got all of these random lavenders popping up in the front yard in cracks. I'm not going to get rid of those. The bees eat the lavender. I love lavender. And it drives people crazy sometimes when they see it. It kind of drives me crazy a little bit too, that I'm letting nature just kind of take over all of these spaces. But I also just find it really soothing. And I've read a book about this, so I'm stealing it from them. I didn't make this up. That when we're all gone, nature is going to find a way to heal. Nature is going to be okay. It's whether or not we're okay in the space that we're living in, right? And so I don't like killing things. I do love squishing aphids. I find it joyful. But yeah, I just want everything to just kind of like be and do its own thing. And it's really rewarding to see everything, to see what flourishes and to see who's interacting with it. It's been great.
Thanks very much to Dr. Jenny Yant for sharing her nature-friendly garden. Her infectious sense of fun and play, her passion for invertebrates, her deep love of the natural world, it's all really inspiring. Jenny shows us that our gardens don't just belong to us, they belong to the many invertebrates that will come if we step back a bit and let our gardens get that little bit wilder. I especially love that Jenny has planted Makamaka wineberry expressly for the prairie moths that are likely to move south in a changing climate. Thanks for listening to Rewilding in Action. I'm Maureen Howard. If you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to like it and to share it with your friends. In the next episode of Rewilding in Action, I'm back in the ORFM studio to talk to Quinn Berenson about moa, what roles these giant flightless birds played, what our ecosystems are missing, and what this might mean for rewilding. Until next time, I will leave you with some bird song recorded in the garden of my guest, Dr. Jenny Yant, a rewilder who is letting nature take the lead.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.